What's going on, guys? Welcome back. And I know I'm over 2 years late to the party, but today I'm finally going to be talking about Star Wars Jedi Survivor, a game that I was highly anticipating but didn't get the chance to play until this last year, because upon its release, it was not compatible with last generation consoles like my lovely PS4. However, it finally released on PS4 last September, so I've played all the way through the game several times, I might add. So I think I have a pretty good idea of all the details contained within the game. I'd say I know it like the back of my hand, and I'm finally ready to review it. I think it is a fantastic Star Wars story, and I want to dive into why that is. This video will not be focused on the gameplay, because that is not where my main interest or investment in this game comes in. I mainly want to talk about the world, the characters, and the themes present in the story. However, I will give my brief thoughts on the gameplay and technical aspects of Jedi Survivor. On that topic, I think a lot of the gameplay in Survivor improves significantly on its predecessor, Fallen Order, especially when it comes to the combat, with the introduction of new lightsaber stances, such as the crossguard or blaster stance, a personal favorite of mine, which made for more varied combat encounters and finishers as opposed to Fallen Order, where you were kind of limited to the single or double-bladed saber. The worlds feel far more vast here, with a heavier focus on character interactions, which I really appreciated, as I'll get into later. The only gameplay mechanic I would say I outright hated was the new Kobo Matter ability for BD1, which involves spreading what I can only describe as this purple flame goo to access locked areas and collectibles. After one or two puzzles of using that mechanic, I never wanted to deal with it ever again. And just to put it out there, I remember this game being criticized for having a poor performance on consoles like the PS5, but I do think the year or so they took to iron things out paid off, because I encountered very few issues on the PS4, aside from the odd glitch that necessitated me restarting the game and losing my progress, some rendering issues, and the game crashing a few times because the amount of storage was just overloading my PS4, but aside from that, the game ran pretty smoothly, and I had an overall positive experience playing it. With that out of the way, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this discussion about the story of Jedi Survivor and how it builds off of Fallen Order, which, as you guys know, is a game that I absolutely adore. I'd say it's probably one of my favorite video games in general, at least of the ones that I've played. Keep that in mind, I would not call myself a pro gamer by any means, I just really love these ones. And one of the things that impressed me most about Survivor is how it carried on from where Fallen Order left off, not just from a story standpoint, but also thematically, reincorporating story elements like the bounty hunter faction, the Haxian Brood, which leads to a pretty cool payoff when Cal eventually encounters Boba Fett, or the reintroduction of Eno Cordova, revealed to be alive and well after presumably being killed in the Jedi Purge. It ties these plot threads into its story naturally without being over-reliant on the narrative of Fallen Order, if you know what I mean. And I love how the previous game, and even the controversial book Jedi Battle Scars, which, despite being flawed, I still genuinely believe did some great things for these characters, transition into this story thematically, by reminding us of who Cal Kestis is. Someone who's never known anything other than the fight. Almost every conversation he has across this game reminds us of the fact that he was a child soldier thrust into a war that he didn't fully understand, and for his entire life he's been fighting this endless battle, unable to pursue something more gratifying or fulfilling for him as a person. Just like Fallen Order, the story of Survivor brings Cal into conflict with characters who present superficially opposing ideologies, yet they reflect a certain part of Cal himself. Dagan Gera, essentially the High Republic equivalent of Anakin Skywalker, someone driven to the dark side by the Jedi Council opposing their high ambitions, has a commitment to achieving his goals that is not that dissimilar from Cal's. Or Ravis, the leader of a ruthless band of raiders committing countless acts of terrorism across the prospecting community of Rambler's Reach, has a similar conviction to his code that Cal can't help but respect. And even my favorite character in the whole thing, who I'm not ready to talk about quite yet. This game's awesome cold open on Coruscant, culminating in a rematch with the Ninth Sister who you fought in the previous game, resulting in Cal dispatching her in combat after trying to reach her with empathy, set the tone for this game, which is far darker than Fallen Order, a game that was not all sunshine and rainbows either. We had arguably the most terrifying depiction of Order 66, children being tortured, and good old-fashioned cultural genocide. But when I reflected on Fallen Order, I realized that that story kept Cal's hands clean for the most part. Of all your main opponents in that game, Cal doesn't kill any of them. Your fight with the Ninth Sister leaves her fate ambiguous until the beginning of this game. Merrin is ultimately the one to defeat Taron Malicos, and Trilla's fate is sealed by Darth Vader. But in this game, Cal kills every single one of his opponents, and despite being a noble warrior who shows them respect, the undertones are far more sinister this time around. There's something brewing under the surface, which eventually explodes. The ludonarrative dissonance of Cal viciously cutting down stormtroopers, bounty hunters, or even innocent creatures on the many planets he explores becomes a relevant part of this story. Everything I've just talked about reaches the emotional height of storytelling in Cal's relationship with Bode Akuna. And let me tell you, man, what a fantastic character. It's crazy to think that Noshir Dalal could play the slimy snake of a character like Admiral Rampart in The Bad Batch and bring this level of empathy to a character like Bode, who on a surface level is pretty hateable. But when you peel back the layers of this character, you kind of get where he's coming from. As you embark on various missions together throughout the story, the bond between Cal and Bode grows beyond that of being comrades in arms. It becomes a brotherhood of sorts, an idea which is reinforced by several lines of dialogue spoken by the characters. But they eventually reach a crossroads. One of them draws a line in the sand that the other is unwilling to cross. And that's what this story comes down to. Two people who are unwilling to compromise on their beliefs, despite their goals being largely the same. And we see how that can have tragic repercussions. Bode and Cal aren't that different. Just like Cal, Bode has lost countless people throughout his life. But unlike Cal, he's willing to walk away from the fight. He's had a taste of the life that Cal has never gotten the opportunity to live, and he's unwilling to leave that behind. They both desire a better future for the ones they care about, but for Cal, that involves continuing the fight. For Bode, that means ensuring the safety of his daughter, regardless of the people that he harms in the process. All of this is beautifully encapsulated through this brief exchange of dialogue, which says so much with so little.
We're gonna sacrifice thousands of people to save yourself. We're a monster boat.
No. I'm a father.
Cameron Monaghan's performance sells us on the idea that Cal was, and still is at heart, a child soldier. He's never been able to escape that past. He maintains those childlike mannerisms. He's almost pouty at a couple points, which is sharply contrasted by Bode, who is clearly an older and more seasoned veteran. He's seen some shit, not unlike Cal himself, but he's reached a level of emotional maturity that Cal has not yet experienced. Cal's growth has stagnated as a result of this war, but Bode is at a different stage in his life, which Cal simply cannot understand. The conflict between these two characters brings a level of moral complexity to the Star Wars franchise we've rarely, if ever, seen. It asks the question that Spock did in Star Trek: do the needs of the many really outweigh the needs of the few? Bode prioritizes the life of Kata above all else, but Cal believes that sacrifices have to be made for the greater good. We all remember Yoda's words in The Empire Strikes Back, but this game has arguably the most brutally real depiction of the dark side we've ever seen. Cal's rampage through the hallways of the ISB outpost on Nova Garon, or his final showdown with Bode on Tanalorr, are harrowing to watch. Seeing these two best friends turned bitter enemies by the unrelenting galaxy around them and the conflict of interest which led them to this point. The conclusion of this game is fascinating to me. It leaves our characters in a place I don't think I've ever seen before in Star Wars, or in a franchise of this type. When Cal kills Bode, it isn't treated with heroic fanfare. It's treated as a solemn eulogy for a fallen hero. He's shown the same reverence as Seer and Cordova, two people whose deaths Bode is directly responsible for. Cal, Merrin, and Grease, our remaining trio, technically accomplished what they set out to do. They've found a sanctuary away from the Empire where they can rebuild, but at what cost? Was it worth it? Now another child has been orphaned, just like Cal and Merrin, and Cal must now do his best to fulfill her late father's wishes that she remain safe. Can he do that? Cal was unable to answer Bode when he asked him that very question. How will this story continue? Will Kata grow to resent Cal for killing her father? There are various different directions that this story could go in. Might it become a Last of Us 2 situation where Kata becomes the new protagonist of the story? I'm not sure, but I'm open to anything as long as it is at the same level of quality as the first two games. If the story of Jedi Survivor shows us anything, it's how irrationally our fear, anger, and negative emotions can cause us to behave in moments of weakness. But it's not all bleakness and depression. As stated previously, the vastness of the open worlds not only makes for great world building within the galaxy of Star Wars, but allows for meaningful moments of character, conversations between people that we ordinarily don't see in Star Wars. You learn and grow to care about all of these colorful characters that Cal meets in his travels. Peely, the kind-hearted botanist who has developed a passion for growing plants as a result of being unable to have a family of her own. Moran, a shady former smuggler who hides behind a veil of sarcasm when deep down he's really a broken man in desperate need of genuine connection. Or even Scuva Stev, the goofy, lovable fisherman whose extensively tall tales seem irrelevant at first before linking up with Cal's journey in a surprisingly touching way. All this is to say that there was clearly an immense amount of time and effort put into carefully crafting these emotional payoffs, which people who only care about the action or boss fights wouldn't get the opportunity to see, which is quite unfortunate because there is a lot more to this game than that. With that said, I don't think this game is perfect. It does have some issues, which I think drag it down and make it a slightly weaker story than Jedi Fallen Order. One of the things I'm kind of conflicted on in Survivor is the story structure itself, not the content within the story. I think most, if not all of that, is extremely well written. Rather, the way that everything plays out, because I think Fallen Order had a pretty solid narrative structure. There was enough variety in the planets you went to without it feeling like you were jumping to one place and back to another just to go back to that other place to get a thing. There was a bit of that in Fallen Order, but it felt like there was a more clearly defined path and goal that the characters were working their way towards. While Survivor does have an ultimate goal that the characters are trying to achieve, it can feel a bit more meandering and too back and forthy for my taste at a few points. It feels like there isn't a clear flow or urgency behind the character's actions, at least before Bode betrays Cal. That's when the story really peaks. The lack of urgency does hurt some of the narrative payoffs they were going for, such as Seer's sacrifice, which is an incredibly effective moment, don't get me wrong. It was badass playing as her, fighting against an army of stormtroopers and facing down Darth Vader himself. But before that point in the story, Seer didn't get to do that much. She was just kind of a pit stop on Cal's various adventures. You dropped in on her, chatted for a bit, had a cup of tea, and hit the road. And then she dies. So I can't help but feel like we were robbed of some awesome Seer content. And although I understand and appreciate the thematic purpose and relevance that characters like Dagan Gera and Ravis have to Cal's character arc, I can't help but feel like they were just kind of placeholders or red herrings, because by the end of the story, they end up feeling more like character concepts rather than fully fleshed out characters. You do learn more about them through the various Force echoes and scans that can be discovered across the worlds that Cal explores. But within the story itself, they just feel like they were there to distract the player until they pulled the rug out from under us with the Bode reveal towards the end. Speaking of Bode, that leads me into my biggest issue with this game, which is that the entire climax is facilitated by a massive plot contrivance. Allow me to set the stage for you. Cal tracks Bode to the icy system of Nova Garon, where he discovers a hidden ISB base. What he does not realize at this point is that Bode has lured him here as a diversion while he and his daughter escape with the compass to Tanalorr. Something they have hammered the player over the head with throughout this game is that this compass is the one and only way to get to Tanalorr. We even found a broken compass, so we then had to go kill Dagon to get the not broken compass, which was still broken, so Cordova had to tinker with it to fix it up. So naturally, you'd assume that our heroes are screwed. How the hell are they gonna catch this guy? Well, in the following scene, Cal and his crew watch a message left by Centauri Kree, Dagon's former partner, which was in Bode's quarters. This message reveals that there's a secret alternative way of getting to Tanalorr, which involves aligning these arrays on Kobo to point into the abyss or something. How would Bode not have known about this alternative path? He's clearly shocked when Cal and Marin arrive to confront him on Tanalorr. So, did he just not listen to the message at all, which is incredibly stupid? Or did he not have time? Either way, this makes no sense, and what makes it even worse is that when Cal arrives at the control center on Kobo, he's ambushed by Imperial forces, after which he remarks that Bode probably tipped them off?
They were waiting for us. Maybe Bode told them we were coming.
Number one, why would the Empire listen to Bode at all, the guy who just betrayed them? And number two, why would Bode assume that Cal would head to the control center unless he knew about the hidden alternate way of getting to Tanalorr, which he clearly didn't know about? I really don't know what the creative team were going for here, unless they want us to assume that Cal's line was just him making an idiotic assumption, but I don't know why they would write that into the script if they didn't want us to think that was the reality of what was happening. This alone drags the game down and makes it an inferior story to Fallen Order, because I can't remember any of the issues in that game being this glaring. However, everything after this point in the story is fantastic. Once Cal and his buddies arrive on Tanalorr, things get back on track. It's just that I wish the road to get there hadn't been so rocky. None of this makes it a bad game by any means, because I still think it's great, and some of the best Star Wars content we've gotten in, like, the last decade. The only competition I'd say it has is Andor and The Bad Batch. I can't think of anything else that comes remotely close to this level of quality, at least in the last few years. But you guys let me know. What are your thoughts on Star Wars Jedi Survivor? Do you think it is equal to, better, or worse than Fallen Order? I know it's taken me a long time to review this game. I wish it hadn't taken so long for it to come out on PS4, but I'm overjoyed to have finally made this video and to have talked about Jedi Survivor. So just whatever your thoughts are, please let me know them all in the comments below. And of course, as always, I hope you guys have a great day. Take care. Bye.